It might sound like a cliche, but I think my honest answer to that question is that I think that this idea of befriending or self-compassion, I think finding a way to turn toward ourselves in difficult times and to be willing to and to train ourselves into meeting even our most difficult experience, to surround ourselves in those moments. I think that in the contemporary spiritual and therapeutic world, there's a lot of emphasis placed on insight, clarity, seeing things clearly, seeing through, insight, which of course is important. I will share that in my experience, speaking over a few decades, what I've come to see in my personal life and also in my clinical work is that it's not insight in and of itself that heals. It's not insight, it's not clarity, it's not seeing through that's going to go to the very core of the heart. It's not enough to transform the wounds of the heart and to place us into the arms of the beloved where we can experience that. But it's actually, and again, this is the cliche part, but you asked me, and I trust you want me to be honest. And that's it, that it's love that heals. It's not insight ultimately, and it's not new techniques. We have a lot of techniques that we use in therapy and meditation, and there's a bunch in this course. But ultimately, I think it's that capacity, and it's a developmental capacity for many of us to become a true friend to ourselves. It sounds sort of simple in a way, but in my experience, especially in my clinical work and in my personal life, of course, it's this capacity, and it requires a certain new kind of courage and a new kind of trust in our experience, in ourselves. It doesn't mean that we like everything that comes up in our experience. It doesn't mean we can accept everything that comes in our experience. But over time, what I've realized is our center of gravity begins to shift when we do this work. And by this work, I mean our own unique combination of meditation, prayer, therapy, relational work, being in nature, embodiment work, massage, whatever it is that we do. And our center of gravity begins to drop into the heart, drop into the belly, drop into the earth. What happens is that we start to be able to be that vessel of kindness, such that whatever arises in our experience, even if we hate it, and this is where it sort of goes beyond words, because it doesn't require that, oh, I love that. I love to feel anxiety. I love to feel that wave of depression. I love to feel my heart breaking into billions of pieces. It's not pretending that we like or love it, but it's this willingness and this commitment. It's like a vow that we make, that we take, that I'm going to meet what arises in my experience with kindness. That is what, in my experience, changes the whole game. And it's a capacity that many of us, and especially if we have histories of traumatic, post-traumatic stress, narcissistic wounding, attachment insecurity, the list, that we didn't come into adulthood with that capacity to be a true friend to ourselves. We were never taught that. We were never shown it. It was never mirrored to us, that possibility of actually being a friend to my own heartbreak, a friend to my own grief. And this isn't some Pollyannish, just, oh, I just accept everything the way it is. And, oh, isn't my grief great? This is a deeply embodied surrounding of our experience in times of difficulty and stress. It's like that feel for me, just the way I speak about it and I experience it myself. It's like that field of kindness is the background field of awareness. And by kindness, I mean a certain holding. I don't mean some cheesy acceptance. I just love this. Isn't this great? I mean, I'm willing in any moment to meet what arises. And this takes a lot of practice in my experience. And what it really takes is a certain capacity to tend to the darkness within oneself, to tend to everything that remains unlived within us. Because as young children, I think, as we all know, we have to push out of awareness so many aspects of who and what we are, even which emotions, which feelings, which sensations in our bodies we're able to experience. if experiencing a certain feeling or emotion or way of being or getting too excited or whatever it is in our family of origin caused or led to a rupture in the field with one of our caregivers, one of our attachment figures, we learn very quickly and very intelligently and adaptively and creatively to push that part of us out of our experience. So it gets tucked away in sort of limbic and bodily circuitry, to use neuroscientific language. If we want to use depth psychology language, we push those parts of us into the shadow. And so if there's all these parts and pieces of our soul, of our heart, of our bodies sort of in the underworld, to speak mythologically, in the shadow, it's going to be very challenging for us to become friends with ourselves. So that's why we talk about the importance of something like shadow work, which is that where we make a journey, not only into the light parts of ourselves. This isn't only a solar pathway of ascent, moving upward, growth, this upward sort of ascending movement that's so common in spirituality and therapy. And it's an essential part of our lives, of course. But there's also that downward descent, a more lunar descent, I think, into those shadowy parts that have had to have been pushed out of awareness. And so I think that to go back to your question, I think it's the radical, revolutionary, wild, untamed practice of self-kindness that I think is really what's over time required for deep, lasting transformation and healing. Insight, clarity, seeing into things, restructuring our thoughts, all of that's important. All of that has a place. But just for me personally, what I've seen, especially in therapy, working with some really bright, courageous women and men who have really suffered a lot. And what I've seen is that capacity to retrain ourselves to become a friend, to become friendly to our experience. And as many of you know, I'm very involved and interested in the alchemical traditions. And so this friendliness to the parts of ourselves and to sort of encourage them to be in dialogue with one another. This is the activity of Hermes, isn't it? Hermes is the connection maker. And, to connect us with the larger forces, the gods, but also what Hermes does, the role of a hermetic consciousness or a hermetic therapy is to bring together those parts of ourselves that have become unfriended. And in the language of relational neuroscience, we talk about, what trauma is a delinking experience. It's where parts of us become unlinked or delinked. And so when we're talking about healing any kind of relational wounding, we're talking about a relinking, a linking together, which is mythologically or alchemically is the work of Hermes.